It's Cape Ann Report, and I'm your host, Maureen Aylward. Our topic is homelessness in Gloucester, and I have three guests with me to discuss this. Melissa Lezynski, the Shelter Director for Action Inc., Julie LaFontaine, the Executive Director of the Open Door, and Reverend Rona Tyndall, who is from the Grace Center. And we're going to discuss what's happening with homelessness in our community. Ladies, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having us.
It's really it's such an important issue to talk about for our community.
I'm so glad you think so.
Yes, it is. I've been very interested in what's happening with homelessness for quite some time, and I've gathered you together today for a conversation, really, about what's happening with homelessness in Gloucester. From your perspectives, and again, it's a conversation, so let's just jump right in. Melissa, let's start with you.
Okay.
You're the director of the shelter.
The manager.
Of the shelter, homeless shelter on Main Street. And what are you seeing right now in terms of the numbers for folks coming in? Are you seeing an increase because it's summertime, or are you seeing maybe a reduction?
It hasn't changed much. Usually winter and summer are different, but in the last year it really hasn't changed much at all. The one thing that we have seen a change in is the number of individuals that have come through. Like for the winter months, it was mostly like about 54 a month we would service. Now it can be anywhere from 54 to 67 each month. And each month it's an increase of new people.
So the shelter provides not only beds per night, but also food, and that's where the Open Door comes in, where I know the Open Door is, you're all working together, the Grace Center, the Open Door, and the shelter downtown, that's run by Action Inc.
So that's absolutely right. Per se, we're not a homelessness organization, and yet the services that we provide are really household stability services. So people who are currently housed will have access to a resource to help stabilize their household financially. And then also we work with community partners like Action, like the Grace Center, and a handful of others to provide food. We have the infrastructure and the ability to provide food at low cost or no cost to the agencies that we partner with, and it's just another way the Open Door can help connect people to good food in the community.
And we run the shelter, I run the shelter as though it was a big household. That's we have 30 plus people a day, and it's also a community meal. A lot of people don't know that about the shelter, but the meals that we cook there, anybody's welcome to come.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's neat.
Open door policy, you're welcome to come.
Really?
Yep.
Do you find that people from the community do drop in?
Yes, every night we usually have the same few folks and then one or two new ones. Depends on the day, but and it depends on who's cooking. Everybody has their favorite cook. Staff cooks, a different meal each night. It's different staff, and people have their favorites. So they're like, oh, who's cooking tomorrow? And they'll decide whether or not they want to come.
And if it's somebody who can't cook, they eat up at the Grace Center.
Yeah.
So Rona, tell us about what's happening with the Grace Center and how this fits in to assist the homelessness population in Gloucester.
So we also get all our food from the Open Door, with the exception of there are 3 restaurants in town in addition to Donut Jim's. The Causeway, the Gloucester House, and Destino's each bring a meal once a month, but aside from that, we get our food from the Open Door. It's cooked by a team of volunteers, so 80% of our work hours at the Grace Center are volunteer hours, which is it's pretty unique and special because it means that everybody who comes through the door is greeted by people who just really want to be there. They're choosing to do that in their retirement. So it's pretty neat. We serve usually about 60 people in a day. So some of those people stay down at the Action Shelter. Others are in the woods. Others are couch surfing. Some have their own homes. Some have apartments or single room occupancies up at the Y or through Action Housing. So there's a variety of people who come to us. Some are employed. And people come in and they go as they need. It's a drop-in center, so they can come in and eat and leave. They can come and hang out for the day and access services. They can do whatever they need in that moment.
What are the impressive things about what's happening in Gloucester around different issues of need or services is that there's a really good coordination, it seems. And
It's extraordinary.
It is.
It doesn't
like no
exist
place
anywhere.
else.
It doesn't.
It's like no
We
place
have-
else on earth.
No.
Yeah.
We have such a special community that everybody really and truly wants to help, and they do.
Yeah.
They find a way. It's not just everybody talks about it and says, oh, well, this is a need. We identify the need. Depends on who it is. I mean, it could be any one of us at any given day that says, hey, by the way, this is bothering me. What can we do? And then we find a way to do it together. And we involve anybody we can.
Yeah. It's tremendous cooperation. And in a very real sense, the Grace Center wouldn't exist without Action in the Open Door because we're so reliant on one another to help.
We
one
are.
another.
You fill in the
We
gap.
do, yeah.
Fill in the gap.
Yeah, fill in the gaps. I want to talk about the reasons for homelessness and why people become homeless, because some folks, given the cost of living on Cape Ann and the wages that are paid, it seems like lots of people are paycheck to paycheck and might not be able to accept that they could be one step away from homelessness.
Well, I'm really
let's
glad.
talk about that.
I'm really glad that you bring that up. It's certainly a reality for many people living paycheck to paycheck, or even a couple paychecks ahead. All it takes is for one thing to happen,
Just one.
sickness, or I was talking a little bit earlier in telling you that 25% of the people who use the food pantry, for example, are coming once a week. Everyone else, out of 7,747 people served last year, comes, this other 75% of that number, come, every other week, once a month, every other month, depending on what's going on. So, for example, someone takes their car in to get it inspected. It needs new tires. They need their car to get to work. So you pay $800 for your tires. You have a car to go to work, but you have no grocery money. And so it's those kinds of things that the Open Door is there to help smooth people over. Get people over the hump, and then we certainly live in a community where grace abounds, and I think that is really demonstrated by the way that nonprofits work together.
Absolutely.
Melissa, you have a story of what you're seeing is that there's more homelessness related to people who are taking care of their parents.
Yeah, that have suffered some type of crisis, basically a personal crisis in their life and their family. Like we've seen a lot, a very huge rise in people that come through shell-shocked because they've just spent the last 2-3 years taking care of their elderly parents, live in the house they grew up in their whole lives, and the parents pass away. They find out, oh wow, the taxes haven't been paid. There's no possible way I gave up my job to be home taking care of them 24 hours a day because I couldn't be alone, and we didn't want to put them in a nursing home, and now what? Next thing you know, the sheriff's put their stuff on the sidewalk, and they're coming to the shelter saying, I'm not really homeless, but I'm not sure what's going on. I'll get back in. And we know that that's not going to happen. Mm-hmm. It's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And it's not just that either. I mean, a spouse dies from an accident, an illness, a depression. There's so many reasons for homelessness that to list them all would take forever, but depression is a big one. A real big one. People can't, in that state, can't get up and do what needs to be done to not end up homeless.
Yeah.
They know,
can't pay their
right.
bills.
They can't answer the
They
mail.
can't go to work.
Right.
Right.
They can't get out of their own way, and that's depression. That is the epitome of depression,
Yeah.
and it's awful.
Right.
And then they lose
awful.
everything.
Yeah.
And then they're homeless and they can't believe it.
Yep, and they're standing in our line, shocked, just shocked.
Well, you bring up such a good point. I think sometimes these things occur, and there's such a deep hole that gets dug. You can't possibly climb out of it.
Right.
Maybe you've used up your savings. Maybe you've used up your 401k, or you borrowed from it, and now you've got to pay it back with taxes.
Credit card debt.
Yep.
Credit card debt with
Yep.
really high rates. And so
Yep.
let's say you do manage to stabilize yourself and climb out. You have a huge hole that you're climbing out of. And it's not
Yeah.
just as easy as, well, now I have a job and everything's going to be okay. You're backfilling on all of that. So.
Well, there's a segment of the homeless population, maybe not staying at the shelter, but of course they're working families.
Yep.
You know, parents with children or a single parent with children trying to make ends meet, and still they're homeless. Have you
Yeah.
seen that here on Cape Ann?
Family Promise. We should have had somebody from Family Promise come. Family Promise really takes good care of the families. Because, as you said, there's a lot of that.
Yeah, and people
We have
could
guests
be.
that work 3 jobs.
You have guests who work
Yeah.
3 jobs and are still living at the shelter.
Yeah, they're usually it's a child support issue or a IRS issue,
Yeah.
and they're paying that off and saving and trying to put whatever happened behind them or get through it, and they just can't possibly afford the rents around here. Definitely, the rents around here are astronomical, and they've been here their whole lives and they can't afford it. So.
Is that why people want to stay here? Because it's the place where they
home.
know it's home,
Sure.
and they don't
That's
want to
what I do.
move to another
Sure.
place where cost of living might be more reasonable.
Yeah.
I
I
can't
mean, it's hard
imagine
to
not
leave your
being
friends
here.
and your family, and this is a little island.
It is.
Everybody knows each other.
Right.
And generations of people whose parents and grandparents and neighbors and
Yeah.
schoolmates all know each other. It's a tough place to leave, and it's beautiful.
It's like Cheers, everybody knows your name and you know theirs, and
Yeah.
we have such a stunning community. I just think we do.
Yeah, it's
That's why I
it
don't
is
wanna
beautiful,
leave.
and people want to stay here. But what about the summer versus winter? Clearly, there's a large tourist industry here, and hospitality jobs increase in the summer.
Yeah.
And then they fall away in the winter. What's happening there with the
We
changes
had
of
a
the
fascinating
season?
conversation a few months ago. Somebody who works for the city came in, and it was a pretty busy day. It was in the colder season, and the Grace Center was full. And this person came back again this summer, and there were 20 people maybe hanging around. And she said, "Where is everybody? Is it because it's summer?" And I said, without making a point of it or thinking about it, well, a lot of people are at work. And she said, they're at work. And
Well,
I
it's
said,
shocking that they
yeah,
people work
most of
and
the people
use these
who are
services.
able to
Yes.
be employed
Yeah.
are employed in the summertime.
Yeah.
And she said, well, why are they homeless? And I said, well, do the math. Do the math. You cannot
Nope.
pay rent on minimum wage, and you cannot pay rent even if you make $500 a week for 15 weeks out of the year. You can't save up enough to pay rent all year long. So that's the problem.
And that's the reality. I think, for so many people, wages just don't keep pace with the actual cost of living. And that's with everything going right.
Right.
And then you add, you add a child care issue or taking care of your elderly parents or other things into the mix, and you see people, falling on hard times. And I do think that, and again, back kind of to the open door and the food pantry framework, people who use the food pantry, much like your story that you shared, they're going to work. They're working 2 jobs or 3 jobs, and it's still just not enough to make ends meet. And so, I think sometimes there are some assumptions about who's homeless. I think there are assumptions about who uses the food pantry, when in reality, it might be different than what people think.
And the number that you just gave is a quarter of Gloucester's population. is
Astounding.
That's right.
Astounding.
So-
That number blew me away.
7,000?
Yeah.
So
Is that again?
it's 1 in 6 Gloucester residents are actually using the food pantry. So of the 7,747 people, over 4,000 of them, and bumping up on 5,000 people, are from Gloucester. So that means that you probably know someone who uses the food pantry, whether you know you do or not.
Sure.
And,
Right.
Absolutely.
And I think sometimes people do everything that they can to appear normal, so that you don't know what's going on, where the spirit meets the bone and under the covers.
Right.
Yeah,
And
as
is
though
that
there's
what's
some
happening?
type of shame involved when really everybody struggles. I don't care who it is, you struggle. Everybody. That's just the nature of life. There is always a struggle, and people are so ashamed to let that show because they're afraid of how they'll be treated.
What about these judgments that people make, or these assumptions that people make about homeless people? Again, you walking side by side with someone down Main Street, and they could be homeless, and you'd never know it, right?
Yes.
Sometimes you do know it. But what about these judgments that people make? I mean, we all make judgments of
we
one
do.
sort or another.
Yep.
And yet our most vulnerable population seems to get the brunt of it. And
Absolutely.
sometimes it shows up in conflict, or it shows up in people who just get angry.
Strange ways.
In strange ways.
I find a lot of it, or I hear a lot of it, when I do the shopping for the shelter. I shop once, twice, sometimes 3 times a week. It depends on how much milk we go through. And somebody always has something to say. One, I have 10 gallons of milk in the cart, so somebody's always curious.
Yeah,
Like,
sure.
why do you have?
What are you doing with that?
What are you doing? Do you have a million kids
Yeah.
or whatever? And then I'll get to the checkout, and I had this problem happening all the time. And I buy 2 pork loins. They're enormous, but we feed 35 to 40 people a night. So I buy 2 huge pork roasts and pork loins, and we cook them in a day. And like I said, community meal, we feed a lot of people. And the woman ringing me up said, "Oh my God, aren't you shopping for the shelter?" I said, "Yes." She said, "You feed them pork loin?" Yes. And she said, "Well, I can't afford pork loin." And she said, "And are my tax dollars paying for that?" And I was devastated because the woman bagging my groceries was staying at the shelter.
Yeah.
The person behind her, ringing up the other customers, was working at the shelter, and that was his second job. I just stood there. I had no idea how to respond. I
What did you
actually
say?
called Matt, my deputy director, and asked her, and she said, "Next time, just tell her she's welcome to come to the meal if she wants pork loin." So I actually did, and then I just avoided her line completely. But yeah, sometimes you just want to get in and get out. It's it's a store,
That's devastating. I mean,
isn't it?
Yes, to have that happen in public with others who are staying at the shelter being judged. And
Yep.
Why do you think people do that? Why do you think people project that kind of judgment on something like this
I think
on a
it's
homeless
because they
shelter?
want to make sure that it's not going to happen to them. And if you're homeless or you're struggling or you're bereft because you did something and I don't do that thing, then I'll be okay.
Right.
When in reality, so much of us are so close to the bone. Already the affordable housing conversation that we've been having everywhere in Gloucester over and
Right.
over again.
Right.
Affordable housing, living wage jobs. It's because all of us know that none of us can afford the rents if we miss a month of pay.
Yeah.
Yeah, or if you break a bone,
If you break a bone.
if you get diagnosed with cancer, you can beat the cancer in 3-4 months, sometimes 6 months, but by then you're homeless.
Sure.
And now what do you do?
Yep.
Because you got too far behind. I mean, Action has a lot of programs that try to prevent homelessness, and advocacy at the main office is fantastic about lining people up with other services. But I have a friend going through the very same thing. Her husband diagnosed with cancer. They went from 2 incomes to 1, and all her time taken up bringing him to chemo and taking care of him, that they're struggling.
Right.
And she had no
Right.
idea that she could ask for help. None.
I think it really it's a good reminder to all of us that even when we feel our own selves reacting in judgment to something, that there's always the rest of the story.
Yeah.
You don't know the rest of the story, and everyone has a story about
Yep.
seeing someone drive up to the food pantry in a Lexus. Well, you might not know, but that person had a job that afforded them that, and they've lost the job. Or they've been divorced, and that's what they got in the settlement, and they can't afford it. They can't afford to keep it, and they can't afford to get rid of it, and they're stuck. So there's always kind of the rest of the story. And you mentioned the grocery store. Another place that this judgment occurs is when someone is using their EBT or their SNAP
Yes,
benefit.
very much
All
so.
the time.
And there's this feeling of, well, I don't buy that, so why should you buy that?
Right, the whole idea that they can
How
go...
dare you buy strawberries?
Right.
Right.
How dare you buy...
Well,
When
strawberries
I
is a big
can't.
one.
And what we know from some of our inside stories is it was someone's birthday, and those strawberries were the one thing the child wanted.
Right.
Or so just I think a good thing to do is
Well,
just
physically,
ask
it's all
ourselves,
they can eat, yes.
right? What is the rest of the story? People, whether they've fallen on hard times or not, deserve to have their birthday recognized, or they deserve to have even a short-term reward, because that's what keeps us going. From
We all need a little treat to keep us going.
And we all need to preserve our dignity, especially in a situation where folks feel shame based on the fact that they've lost their home or something that happened to them that they couldn't control. Not everything can be controlled in life, as a lot of us know. We're all working in space where there's lack of control around people's circumstances. People need that.
Absolutely need it. We need it to feel like people.
Yeah, and we mostly do that. We'll go and get a cup of coffee if we're having a good day, or we'll treat ourselves to this, that, and the other thing.
Mani or petty.
And so it's important that we also allow other people who are
experiencing homelessness and or hard times. Yeah, it sometimes does bother me that people will think, well, they live at the shelter. They shouldn't be getting their nails done. Are you kidding me? They live at the shelter. They're there because their spouse died or their parent died. Why shouldn't they get their nails done? If that's all they have today, that's it. My big thing, anytime we hire new staff, my big thing is, please, make the coffee and make it well. Use cold water for the pot. Put X amount of coffee in and make sure it's done for them. Because if all I'm getting is one cup of coffee, like one hot cup of coffee for my day, if that's what's going to get me through the day, I know I would be devastated if something happened and I didn't get that cup of coffee.
And shouldn't it be delicious?
Yeah, shouldn't it be wonderful?
Of all the people in the community who deserve the very best.
Right.
It's all they have.
Right.
It needs to be the best we can offer.
It needs to be amazing. Yes, exactly. Right.
And given the lack of control of things around us and what's happening in the larger world, our world is changing, and things, even on the local level, we feel that, we see it. It's our lives every day. How do you see people coping? Are you seeing an increase in compassion and empathy for folks, even though the larger world is sort of unsure, there's uncertainty out there?
I think that, to your point, with so much going on in the world that we can't control, it becomes even more important to just really focus on our local community, the lives that we touch every day, and we see that with our volunteers, we see that with people who support our organizations, and we see that with people that we just bump into on the street.
And the amazing thing about Cape Ann is that all we have to ever do is say we could use something, whatever it is, and all of a sudden it comes in grace upon grace upon grace.
It does.
We need socks. All of a sudden we have 1 million. We need a volunteer for this.
Not just one place, but then the next place
Every
too.
place.
If the Grace Center needs socks, the shelter must need socks.
Right.
I mean, it's
Like
just
period partners.
Period partners. Oh my
Abby
God, they're
Lundberg
amazing.
is doing this period partners.
Yes.
And she was distributing them through the open door, right? But then somebody thought, well, wait a minute, there are women at the shelter. Wait a minute, there are women at the Grace Center. And all of a sudden, we have, just such graciousness, such kindness.
A huge increase, too, I think, in the holidays. I've seen a huge increase. We've always had people that go above and beyond.
Yeah.
We have one woman, Lucy, God bless her.
Oh, yeah.
She's amazing, and she cares so much. But she also, even she was astounded at how many people still wanted to give, and how many people did. Last year, I was overrun with gifts for our guests. Overrun. I didn't even know what to do with them all. I was moving them from room to room to room, trying to hide them. And then, the heat would break in one room, and I'd have to put them in another room. And there was candy in the stockings at one point. And
then you had the Project Uplift, all the toys.
Yep. Yeah, it's amazing. And so I really think we live in a special community. And like Rona said, we ask, we receive.
Right.
People want to help. And I think that's what I'm seeing now. People want to lift each other up.
I wonder sometimes if part of that on Cape Ann is because since so many people know each other, those are our brothers and sisters, and they're our children and our parents, or they're the neighbor or the kid we went to school with. And so there's already a fondness and a sense that this is not other, this is we.
This is us.
This is we together.
Right.
And with the increase in awareness about addiction, all of us have people who we love who have addiction, right? Everybody loves somebody with an addiction.
Right.
And so now we can look and we can say, I guess I understand that a little bit better than I did 5 years ago, or
Right.
before that happened to my family, or before that happened to my
Right.
friend.
Right.
And, that anytime we understand one another, we're kinder.
Absolutely.
Yes, and acting on a local level makes you feel involved,
Yeah.
and so there's so many great organizations. We only have 3. There were
there's
so
so
many
many.
There was
others.
an endless list.
Endless. Yeah.
I only have
endless
3
list.
spots here, but future shows will.
Well,
do
speaking of
too.
that, and only having 3 spots, and how many agencies and people there are to help, Gloucester has this high-risk task force when all the key helping agencies get together once a month, and they do brainstorming, and they can, if only with people's permission, but if somebody said, yeah, I need some help, they can get a signed release, and everybody talks about how do we put our heads together to get this person who just keeps falling over and over and over again the help they need. So it's a very intentional, cooperative, communal uplifting for the people who really are the most vulnerable.
Yeah, we
So
talk
you're seeing
about
people-
it at the high risk too. We talk about everything, what the fire department's seeing, what the police department's seeing, what I'm seeing at the shelter, what the main office is seeing with advocacy or just the intake specialist, and what the Grace Center is seeing, what the food pantry is seeing. We just talk about what we're seeing and if there's anything we're missing, what
Yep.
needs to be addressed, and then we figure out how to address it.
Because if this
No matter
person's
what it
been to the
is.
emergency room every single day for 2 weeks, well, what are they doing during the day? Oh, Grace Center says they're with us. What are they doing at night? Oh, they're not at the shelter. They're sleeping in the woods. They came down for supper the other
Yep.
night, and
Yeah.
and all the pieces go together, and really just to wrap them around with love and services.
So you're seeing this sometimes a shift from homelessness to people getting housed.
Yes.
There is that,
There is some,
but
yes.
it's difficult still to do that.
It is very difficult, and it's a long wait. And there's so many people vying for the same resources that it is a struggle, and it is a long wait, and that's the hardest part. We tell everybody, stick with it, do what you need to do. We're here. Don't rush it. Don't panic. It will happen, but we can't tell you when. And the wait is usually about 1.5 to 2 years, sometimes more.
That's a long
More
time.
depending on if you have other issues that you have to go back and correct. Because I don't know about you, but I've got plenty of wreckage from my past that I've had to go back and get through and fix, and we all do. And then it takes a little longer, but
Well, the hole's deeper.
yeah, the hole's deeper and you
Yeah,
gotta get
some
out
people
of it. Yeah.
fall out of line and then have to get back into line
Right.
because something else happens.
Right.
And, but don't give up, right?
Don't give up. Absolutely not.
And if you
Right.
need services, make sure that you tap into one place. You could call the police for services, or you could call, any of these
Definitely
organizations.
go to Action main office and meet with the intake specialist. Advocacy will set you up with whatever you need. They'll do referrals to wherever you need. Grace Center does the same thing.
Grace
They
Center
have
just
tons-
drop in, no lines, no waiting.
Yep.
Come in and
And
tell
they
us
got
what we
great
can do
food
for you.
over there.
We do.
And, certainly at the open door, while it's not direct homelessness services, we're a lot of preventative
Yes.
maintenance. And then also for someone who finds themselves going from shelter into housing, there's the food that we provide, and also household items and things from Second Glance to help people
Because
get
you
set up.
outfit everybody who gets
I know.
their own.
You
who
outfit
gets
the
their
whole
own place.
community.
Yeah.
You fill up that apartment.
Yeah,
Yes.
I guess they're stunned when they see what they get from
So we're
the food
out of
pantry.
time, but Melissa Lezynski from the Action Shelter, Julie LaFontaine from the Open Door, and Reverend Rona Tyndall from the Grace Center. Thank you for joining us on
Thank
this
you.
important
Thanks for
topic.
having us.
Thank you for having us.
And
Thank you.
homelessness
Thank you.
in Gloucester. Viewers, you can connect with us on social media. Please check out our website to connect with us. We'd really like to know what you think and what your concerns are. I'm Maureen Aylward. Thank you for being with us on Cape Ann Report. Take care.